There, it might be happening eventually.
You said you just grabbed the audio for this for your for the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Like the video goes on my YouTube page or whatever, and it gets a little bit of traffic, but there's more downloads on the actual show. What the
Yeah.
heck is happening? There it is. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the interview portion of Podcast 451, where tonight we have the amazing J.Thorn with us. Yay!
How you doing?
How's it going, man?
All right. In about 20 minutes, I'm gonna make some announcements on some middle class tax breaks. So I thought I'd stop by your podcast before State of the Union
Awesome.
tonight.
That sounds really good.
That sound good to
I'm glad. Yeah. I was looking forward to any information about books or tax breaks.
Well,
So,
great. All right. I'm gonna deliver then.
is that- That's awesome. Someone who comes to deliver. That's what we're all looking for out here. So there's like seriously a ton of stuff I want to talk to you about, and I don't even know where to start. To do a real quick, brief synopsis about you, you're a horror writer.
Yes.
Is that the quickest, easiest way to do it?
Yeah, I kind of steal from Sean and Johnny. Like I forget what their thing is. It's like they're storytellers, I think is what they say.
Yeah, dude, for
So
real.
I kind of keep it like I write horror. I tell stories. That's pretty much what I do.
Well, I think you and I kind of come from the same crop, whereas you come from music before doing author stuff. So even in the music you were doing, you were still telling stories and being a storyteller.
Oh,
So it's just,
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it
So
all comes from the same place, doesn't it?
I think so. I really, really do. I think when I was doing the band all the time, before I was doing anything else, I just felt like I was doing that because I didn't think enough of myself to go to film school.
Ah.
So I felt like every songwriter was just like was a filmmaker deep down who was kind of stepped on by everybody and told they couldn't do it. So they just started a band in the garage with their friends.
Yeah,
But
probably some truth to that.
why don't you share a very small, brief history about that aspect? Because that's pretty interesting.
Sure, and
I don't really get to talk about that.
and it's cool to call you Cece, right?
Yeah, you can call me CC, you can call me Creep, you can call me Shirley.
Okay.
Just don't call
I
me.
wasn't sure what yeah, I just wasn't sure what the reveal of what you were cool with. All right, so CC it is. Yeah, I guess I started I started kind of late, really taking my creativity seriously. I've been a creative person my whole life. I joke, I geek out on Dungeons and Dragons. I was a kick-ass dungeon master back in the day, back in the '70s, and I always loved telling stories, and I was really artistic. And it really wasn't until I was well into my 30s where I started to sort of embrace it. And I think part of that was family dynamics. I kind of came from a blue-collar, middle-class background, and creativity was not really valued. Hard work was valued, but creativity was kind of seen as less serious or playful, So I didn't really explore too much until I was well into my 30s. But at the same time, I kind of dabbled in guitar and songwriting and stuff, and I bounced around in a few bands. I played in bands in Nashville. I played in bands in New York City, and then here in Cleveland, where I've been for about the past 10 years. And I got together with my buddy Angus Kahn in 2006, and we formed Threefold Law, which is sort of a Sabbath-y type of doom rock band. And
Nice.
and that's kind of where it all started. And we built that band from scratch, and they're still going. I left the band. One of the hardest decisions I ever had to make is I left the band in May of last year because I couldn't do everything. I wanted to be in a band. I wanted to write, And I felt like I was holding the guys back because they were trying to book gigs and they were trying to book practices, and I was having a hard time making that stuff because I was so busy with my family and the writing stuff. And I love those guys like brothers, but I basically had to walk away from that, and that was tough because
That
Angus
is,
and
man.
I, yeah, I mean, we were together for 8 years, and it's an original Threefold Laws original music, so it wasn't just like a cover band or weekend warrior gig. Like we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that. And but it was great because that was the first professional opportunity I had to kind of get into my creativity and the writing. As I'm sure you're aware, there's this real sweet spot between sort of horror and dark fantasy and heavy metal, and
Yeah.
it seems to be and that's just sort of two subgenres of each that kind of go nice together. But I kind of found that, and that's how I got into the writing aspect.
Wow, man. That's pretty deep. That's heavy shit. No, seriously,
Probably
like
more than you want to know.
that's really fucking like I didn't know about any of that until today, actually. I was looking up some stuff on you and I had no idea about that, so that's amazing. Um but there were a few things I wanted to talk to you about as far as your writing goes. One of the things that I did do and I recommend everyone do is go to your website, jthorn.net, and watch the video that you gave at Author Marketing Live. That
Ah,
was really, really good, man.
thanks.
It was just like you don't really get to see a whole lot of people kind of stripped down like that. Not physically, but like you know what I'm saying. Like just let it all out as far as the actual journey. You know, you hear about like, yeah, I was struggling and then I wasn't. You know,
Yeah.
but, like you don't get to like go through kind of the numbers like you did. But so a couple things that you hit on in there was experimentation, and you were talking about how you went from different sizes of books, like you would do like short stories and novellas, and so with all the experimentation you've done, what have you found works?
Man, I wish I knew. I think I think what works depends on what you want at that moment. And I know that's not a great answer, but I'll give you an example. I have a few good friends who are sort of getting their feet wet in writing, and one of them I co-wrote a book that's coming out next month with Dan Padavona, and he's a great guy, and he's a new author. He's got one novel. He's kind of asked me that question. He's like, what should I do? Should I write full books? Should I write short stories? And really what it comes down to is it kind of depends where you are on that arc, that career arc. Assuming you're in it for the long haul. Like if you're in it just to make money, I got no advice for you. But if you're in it like to build a career, I think early on it's important to have as much material as you can on the platform. Amazon, of course, but and other platforms as well. So if I were starting out right now, I think I would publish short stories, as many as I could get out, as fast as I could get them out, in support of at least one novel, so that if a reader finds you and they really like what they read, they've got somewhere else to go. Now, as you get further along in your career arc and you start producing more stuff, you can kind of pull back the shorter things and release more full-length books. So I think it depends on where you are. For me, where I am right now, I think I've got to stay focused on writing novels in series, and I think for me that's kind of where I am. And it's easy for me to get sidetracked with other projects and other novellas and short stories, and I have to be really careful not to get sucked into that because it's stuff's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But for me, short stories don't sell for shit. I mean, I don't sell any short stories. So it's kind. I mean, they're fun to write, but like I'm not going to make any money off them.
Yeah. As far as experimentation with your sales copy goes,
Yeah.
uh, have you found some things that work better than others, other than it's not for you to describe your book, it's to sell your book?
Well, that's definitely the key, right? I think that the impulse when you're an artist is you're so passionate and you're so emotionally connected to it. You want to tell everyone all about the story, and the product page is not the place for that. Frankly, readers don't care about the story. At that point, what you're trying to do with that product page at sales copy is you're trying to hook them, and you've got to hook them with something interesting. And all you have to do is think about movie trailers and how you don't get the whole, like in that 30-second movie trailer, you don't get the whole story, right? You just get enough to hook you, and I think that's what the product description should do. And what's really crazy, what I've found with the product description is the thing that has worked the best for me is a disclaimer. And I have a disclaimer in my product description for just about every book. And it's not just for like gore and violence and whatever. Like, I'll give you an example. Portal Arcane 1, which is the first book in in the Portal Arcane series called Reversion. It's a very sort of esoteric, psychological, alternate reality, dark fantasy. It's not slasher gore, right? So in my product description, I put a warning that says, like, if you're looking for a fast-paced, like gory horror novel, like, this is not for you. And I think it's really important to let the reader know exactly what they're going to get, because horror is such a wide. There's so many things you could label as horror, and if someone's looking for like teenage girls at the summer camp around the lake story, that's very different than like an alternate reality, alternate universe story. So I think you just have to be really clear in your product description what the reader's going to get.
Yeah. Now, about your Portal Arcane series, can you describe a little bit what that's about?
Yeah, I can. It's really about redemption. I mean, it's as simple as that. I think there's a lot of me in that story. I didn't write myself as the main character, but there's a lot of my own personal journeys in that story. And one of the predominant themes, not only in that series but in everything I write, has to do with redemption. And really the question is, when do you earn it? Like, when do you earn the right to a second chance? Or are there some things as humans that we say, I just can't give you another chance on that? And that's kind of what the story's about. So like this guy, he wakes up and he's in this forest and he falls from a noose. And so he clearly knows it's a failed suicide. But he hits the ground, and it's the world, but it's different. And he knows immediately something's really off. He doesn't know if he's in another place, if he's dead. He doesn't know. And so part of his story is trying to figure out what's happening. And at the same time, there's this force, this cloud that's sort of reverting the world. It's kind of eating it from the edges. So there's this tension about him trying to figure out what's going on before whatever this force is crushes the world. And that's kind of the story.
Nice. And that's a 3-book series, or is that?
Yeah, it's a trilogy. Yeah, and so okay. The story goes, it comes complete and to a complete, satisfying close at the end of book 3. And I know sometimes readers are wary of series because they feel like they get invested, and then the writer either stops or takes a long time to finish it. But that one is a trilogy, and it's done and it's complete. So.
Now, was that your biggest? Was that like your flagship kind of series for you?
I think it is. It is because it's my personal favorite, but I also think it's my best writing so far, and I think it's because it's a little different. I have some more straight-up horror stuff. I have a post-apoc novel and novella, but the Portal Arcane stuff is really sort of. I'm not going to say it's unique, because there's nothing unique about sort of people landing in alternate universes, but I think it's uniquely me.
Yeah. Did you find when you finished that, did you go through any like fear in yourself, like, holy crap, this is the series that everyone's into, and now it's fucking done. What am I gonna do now? Like was there any like holy shit moment for you on that?
There wasn't, because I finished that series before it was even selling anything. So, really, I mean, that's the truth. Like, I read it because I loved it, and by the time I finished book 3, book 1 wasn't perma-free, and I was selling like 5 copies a month. So it wasn't like there was a great demand and people were like, "Oh, you got to write more." Like I basically finished that before anyone even knew about it.
So right now, what's the big series that you're doing?
Well, I'm starting a new one because I have 2 complete trilogies, and in 2015 I was going to start a new one. So I'm starting a new one called Orion's Order, and that manuscript is going to be going to my editor real soon. But this book that I co-wrote with Dan Padavona is going to come out first. That's probably going to come out next month, and that is a completely different world from anything either of us have written. And as of right now, it's a standalone.
Right on. So you don't ever go through any kind of worry about ending something.
I haven't yet. I would love to have that problem, but I haven't had it yet. And I think I was in a situation where I had way more product out there before I was selling anything. So I just
Yeah.
didn't really know what to write. I just kind of wrote what I wanted, and I wanted to make sure I finished stuff.
Yeah.
So writing a trilogy and finishing it was really satisfying. And for both Portal Arcane and for the Hidden Evil trilogies, I even included about 40 or 50,000 words in the box set that are short stories that are set in that world with a whole bunch of like behind the scenes stuff about the characters, about how I wrote things, about why I wrote them, and boxing those two things up felt really good. It felt like closure on stories and like really value, like for a reader who was really into that series, like those box sets would really add some value.
That's awesome. Now you're in the Horror Writers Association, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Um, how is that for a self-published author?
Yeah, it's a bit. I have mixed feelings about it, honestly. If you know, if what you mentioned that Author Marketing Live, like one of the things that I've never been into is sort of like keeping up with the Joneses. I don't enter many contests. I don't any. I'm not trying for many awards because I really feel like those are so subjective, and not that
Yeah.
they don't matter. They just don't matter to me. What matters
Mhm.
to me are readers who are willing to open their wallet to enjoy my art. Like for me, that's the only metric that matters. So I've never really pursued those, and for that same reason, I never really pursued the Horror Writers Association. Like I was not going to get an agent. I was not going to seek a traditional publishing deal, so therefore I was not going to be in it. And then this past summer, they changed all the bylaws and allowed indies in. And so I started looking at my sales sheet, and I was like, you know what, I qualify, and I qualify based on sales. And I felt pretty good about that. You know, it wasn't who I knew. It was like, no, this is what I sold, and so I'm in. And so, like I said, I kind of have mixed feelings. I think there's still sort of an old boy network in the organization. At the same time, I got to commend them. They're trying to roll with the changes. You know, they see what's happening and they're adapting. So I kind of have mixed feelings about it.
Is that adaption? Is that something that the whole organization is about, or is that just like the leadership?
Uh, I'm not close enough to it to tell. Rocky Wood was the president. He unfortunately passed away this I think it was last month or may have been November. And so there's some Lisa Morton, I think, took over as the president. And and they, they're very gracious, and I'm part of some of the sort of internal bulletin boards. I honestly just haven't spent enough time in there to kind of get a feel for it. Like I'm not gonna put anything up for a Bram Stoker. It's just kind of not my thing. I'm great for people that do, but I'm probably not going to do that. So I don't know. I just kind of have this real tangential relationship with the whole organization, and maybe over time I'll kind of get a better sense of it.
Um, Now you had a podcast. I guess you still have it technically, the Horror Writers podcast, and after 20 episodes, yeah,
Hmm.
you guys pulled the plug on it. And why is that necessarily?
It's sort of like when a band breaks up and people are like, "Why'd you guys break up?" And you're like, "Oh, we just want to do other things." They're like, "No, really, why did you break up?" So, So, but the truth is there was no drama. And I know Richard Brown, who was my co-host, I know he was really disappointed. I know he's still disappointed. And I was, I'm kind of disappointed too, but honestly, I think I was the one that was like, I think we should stop doing this, and I kind of forced that a little bit. But the truth is this: when I started that, I felt like I needed to get some skin in that game, and I felt like I could make a difference and I could help out some new authors. And over 20 episodes and maybe 6 to 8 months, I kind of just ran out of stuff. And I looked around and I looked at some of the other podcasts specifically on sort of writing and marketing, and I was like, it's all covered. Like, I just can't add a lot. And so, but I kept doing it because Richard and I had a great relationship, and we had a great dynamic on air, and we had some great guests. And then after the Pet Cemetery episode, we said, okay, we got to have a meeting about what we're going to do next. And we were kind of in a hangout. We're like, okay, got any ideas? And he's like, no. I'm like, well, okay, well, what are we going to do? And he's like, we could just talk. And I'm like, yeah, we could. But I kind of want to deliver some value. And so we both kind of came to the conclusion that we could string it out and we could sort of self-indulge and just do it with each other for each other, but like it wasn't really going to be very valuable. And so it might seem weird that like, wow, you're only 20 episodes in, subscriber rate was going up, people were talking about it, and then you pull the plug. But I just kind of felt like we painted ourselves into a corner. And even I named the show the Horror Writers Podcast. So right off the top, like there's a real narrow segment of audience there. And they were well served, but you're not going to get traction with that sort of narrow audience.
I see. I really enjoyed, especially the first bunch of episodes you did. All of them were good. The super short ones, though, that you were doing, that were just like, this is what's happening and this is what you need to know. Those are really good, and my favorite one was actually the one with you on the train. That was seriously like so fucking inspiring, man.
Oh, thanks, man.
So tell us about your Amtrak adventure.
That was, I mean, this is not hyperbole, and people say this all the time, but it was a once in a lifetime experience, and I have. Sometimes it's hard for me to fly. I have inner ear issues, and changes in altitudes can be really painful. So I can fly if I absolutely have to, but I avoid it at all costs. And I had to get from Cleveland to San Francisco, and it involved a client that I was working with, and so I was able to have it subsidized because it was kind of expensive. But I was able to get a seat on that train, and for all the things I hate about this country and our government, and I'm not going to ever get into politics or religion, but sort of seeing what's out there and what this country is made of was really inspiring. And I sat at the window in my car from Chicago to San Francisco, like staring out the window, and I mean it goes through like the Great Plains and through Iowa and through the Rocky Mountains and through Utah and Northern California, and it was just incredible. And I knew I was going to have, it took about 2.5 days, so there were 2 nights on the train. And if you've never taken Amtrak before, it's not as bad as you think, and that's probably not a great slogan for them, for their marketing department.
What are you talking about? That's perfect, man. It's not as bad as you think, Amtrak.
But like I had a private sleeper car, which is basically like a closet with a bed in it, but I could lay down and I could sleep, and they serve hot meals in a dining car. You can get up and you can walk around. I had my laptop. I wrote like 40,000 words going out. I just wrote the whole time, and I read, and I stared out the window, and I took pictures, and I did that podcast. So, I mean, some people see that like, oh, that would be like pure hell if I had to sit on a train for 2.5 days from Chicago to California, but I was loving it, and then I got to come home the same way. So it was great. I absolutely loved it.
That's awesome, man. As soon as I heard that podcast, I immediately went on Amtrak, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? What's happening? Oh, that was awesome.
Yeah, I got a
Uh,
retweet by Amtrak right before I left. I was like I'm playing around. I'm like, I'm gonna tweet to Amtrak and say, I'm getting ready to go on a trip, and they retweeted it. So that was pretty cool.
that's awesome, man. Um, can you go into as much violent detail as you want about your experience with Twitter?
Yeah, it's still ongoing. Here's what happened with my Twitter experience. I had a plugin on my WordPress site called, you know what? I'm gonna say what it is because those bastards deserve the bad publicity. It was called Revolution Slider, and it's a little widget that displays an image and then slides them in and out. And it was a really common plugin for WordPress, and tens of thousands of people had it installed on their WordPress site. And apparently what happened is they had some type of exploit or vulnerability where hackers could get access to admin rights through this plugin. And this is what I think happened. I don't know this for sure, but I think what happened was the company knew that they had the exploit and they patched it, but they didn't like announce it. And I don't know enough about that sort of IT side to know what the protocol is, but whatever it was, they didn't do it. So all these people had this plugin running and with an exploit, and they didn't know they had to update it to cover that. And so tens of thousands of websites got hacked. Now, mine technically didn't get hacked, but what happened was because I had that plugin on it, Google Safe Browsing identified my website as having malware. Well, Twitter pulls their blacklist from Google Safe Browsing. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, any link to jthorn.net from Twitter with their little Twitter referral code, right? If you go, it pulls up like this site could be malicious. Well, that happened to me right in the middle of a King Sumo giveaway that is driven by tweets.
Yeah.
And this happened in the second week of December. This is January 20th. I'm still blocked. So as soon as I found out that I had this plugin that was a vulnerability, my webmaster immediately took care of that problem. We uninstalled it. I went to Google Safe Browsing. I resubmitted my site. They gave it the green check, all clear, and yet Twitter is still blocking it.
Man, that is rough. Did you have a hit on your King Sumo from it?
Oh, big time! It stopped it dead. It was the last King Sumo I did in December. I think it might have been Cujo. I was giving away a first edition hardcover of Cujo, and I was getting like 50 to 60 entries a day. And I woke up the next morning and there was like one. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And that's how I figured out what was happening, is because the entries because if you think about it, if you're on Twitter and you click on a link in a tweet and you get a big message from Twitter that says, warning, this site could be harmful, you're not gonna keep going, right? So it just killed that. And what I had to do is I had another domain, thornpublishing.com. I had to activate that, reinstall WordPress, move my giveaways over to that site, and I'm running giveaways off of that. And the one I'm running right now is Blair Witch Project signed DVD, and that seems to be going okay so far. Fingers crossed.
Did you get any like negative response from it from people?
Not from many people. I think what people did is like they clicked the link and they saw the warning and they just stopped. I sent, and my webmaster and I pleaded with people on social media, and I know people on my behalf sent to Twitter, like you can submit submit your link that basically says this site's okay, it's been fixed, whatever, and dozens, and got the auto response, and you reply to it, and Twitter says, thanks, the case is closed. And you're like, all right, there's no phone number, there's no live chat. And I'm not bitter about social media. Like, I think social media serves a purpose, but it's a warning. Like, if you're an author and you're banking all of your marketing and and your sales approach on a social media platform, you're doomed. And it's just a matter of time before it bites you in the ass. And it may not, but when it does, it's going to hurt.
As far as Facebook goes, is when you have your like pages, and now your like pages are, you have to pay to get your views, and now on your normal pages, if you put a link in it, you got to pay to boost your link or whatever. How has that affected your strategies, let's say?
Well, up until this week, I had never boosted a post. I was philosophically against it. When those algorithms changed, I was like, that's not right. I think that you should get a pure organic reach if someone has clicked like on your page. I understand Facebook needs to make money. I understand it's their platform and they can do whatever the hell they want with it. But I don't have to be complicit in that. So what I did this week is I did a little experiment, and I did a mini rant, a politeful rant on Facebook boosts. And I said to people, you're not going to get my stuff, and so if you opt into my mailing list, you're guaranteed to get my stuff. But if you don't do that, you may not hear from me. And I boosted that post, and that just ended, and it is the click rate on that when I last checked was 0.0007%.
Jeez, man.
So I know there are people who are more savvy than me that will tell me everything I did wrong and why I only got that click-through rate, and great for them. I really don't care, and I wish them the best of luck, but I am done with Facebook advertising.
Nice. Well, you also seem to be one of the only people who I've ever met who understands Pinterest, maybe. I saw on your site you have a Pinterest button, and I think last week or the week before, I'm like, I'm gonna attempt to try to do Pinterest here, and I was on there for about 45 seconds, clicked a couple burritos and a hamburger, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm out.
Yeah, I enjoy Pinterest, and with all social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or Pinterest, those are the three that I'm actively engaged in. I should do more on Google Plus, but I don't. But all the social media stuff, I tend to do what I enjoy. I rarely sell. Every once in a while, I had a BookBub ad for last month, and so I tweeted that, and that's it. I'm not the type of author who's posting links constantly. So Pinterest, when I discovered that, it was just a lot of fun. I might be dating myself and really geeking out here, but when I was in high school, we always got magazines like Circus Magazine or any of the music magazines, and we would cut out these great live shots of bands, and we'd tape them up inside our school locker. Yeah. So whenever you opened your locker, people would look, and they would be like, okay, they knew what you were into. They could identify, or they could be repulsed. Most of the time, the girls were repulsed. The guys would be like, dude, and the girls were like, you're weird, whatever. Because it was all bands, right? Yeah. Well, that's kind of what Pinterest is. Pinterest allows you to kind of show people who you are, and what I like about it, and I know this is weird being a writer, but I don't feel any pressure to be witty or humorous or informational. I just click pin. If I like the picture and I think it relates to me, I click pin, and that's it. And I've just been doing that out of my own enjoyment. I don't have any expectations about selling anything on Pinterest. And what happens over time is if you look at my boards, you start to see, you get a picture of sort of who I am. And even if we've never spoken, you kind of get to know what my interests are, what I'm into, where I came from. So I think that's a really cool thing with Pinterest. And I think Instagram's a little different, because I think Instagram is more sort of I'm not on Instagram, but I understand it's more of your own pictures that you're taking, and whereas Pinterest is more sort of you're just identifying. And the big one for me is movie posters. I love movies. I'm constantly pinning really cool movie posters, and that tells you something about someone too. If you ask someone what their favorite movie is, you kind of get some insight onto what they're like. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Now about the King Sumo stuff, have you had a lot of success with them?
Well, the jury's out. I think this particular contest, the giveaway that I'm doing right now, is going to be a real indicator for me. So if you don't know what King Sumo is, it's a WordPress plugin that allows you to run giveaways off of your site. It's expensive. It's not cheap, but it's really good. And what's really cool about King Sumo is, like, you may have heard of Rafflecopter. So with a Rafflecopter, you get extra points extra entries if you like tweet or you like something. The problem with Rafflecopter, and I think they just changed this, is it shows you how many people are in it. So if you go to a Rafflecopter and you see there's like 10,000 people entered, psychologically you're like, I'm not going to enter that. There's already 10,000 people in there, right? Well, King Sumo doesn't show that. And so people, and you also get extra entries for King Sumo if anyone else enters with your link. So if you enter King Sumo and you hit the tweet button and someone else enters King Sumo with your tweet, you get 3 additional points. So it's everybody wins, and King Sumo is really fantastic. And so I ran 3 in December before Twitter really screwed me over, and I think the one contest, the one giveaway for the stand, I think I had over 800 people that entered that. And what's really cool about that is they're readers who I know will like my stuff because they're entering a giveaway for a Stephen King book. And if you're not into horror, you don't give a shit about a Stephen King book. And I think that's a mistake a lot of authors make with giveaways, is they give away a Kindle Fire or an Amazon gift card. And that's great, but you're not getting your tribe. You're just getting free seekers.
No, that was, when I saw that you were doing that, that was amazing. You were giving away first edition hardcovers, right?
Right.
That's sick, man.
Yeah. And I've got a whole stack. Like, I can't wait. Like, I had so much fun, man. I went into a used bookstore, and I went into the horror section, and I was just like I was like Satan on Christmas morning. I was like pulling books off the shelf. I was like, oh, Dean Koontz, Lovecraft, King, and there were so many first edition hardcovers there, and it was awesome. And I was like, these are going to be great giveaways because they're going to emotionally connect with people. It's fun for me to give these away. People are going to be excited about it, and it's going to get the right people. And I'll tell you the indicator for me. Like, I did those 3 giveaways. I probably added, I'm going to say, around 500 people to my mailing list from those 3 giveaways. And that doesn't matter as much as the fact that my next email I sent to my list had a 55% open rate. And if you know the industry standard, that's really good. And I think that's because I got the right people. It's not about how many you get; it's about getting the right people.
For real, that's so good, man. You have a video on your Amazon author page of you reading a part of a book. And what was the book for that?
Oh man, I totally forgot about that. I think that was a short story. Oh yeah, I totally forgot that was even up there. Man, you're a sleuth. You're a detective there, CC. Yeah, that was Hearts of Ochre, I think, was the name of that.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, how does doing videos help you and your platform and all that? But you don't even remember that it was there.
I think that was an early experiment. If I remember correctly, I think I even have some, like, an instrumental music bed behind that I did myself. And that's really fun. Like, I don't know if, as a musician, if you've ever tried that, but if you take one of your own short stories and you narrate it, and then you also create the ambient soundtrack for it, it's a lot of fun. Like, it's not going to sell. Some people won't get it, but like, as an artist, I really enjoyed that. And the video stuff, 2015 is going to be my year for video. So I ended, the podcast, but I have something else in the works that I think is going to be really cool, and I think it's really going to be appealing to fans of horror and dark fantasy more so than writers of it, which is going to be a good change for me.
Nice, man. I just have a few more little nerdy questions here.
Yeah.
So you have a children's book, right?
Right.
Now, that's called the Monroeville Monster. Is that what that was
Yes.
called?
Yes,
Does that
correct.
have anything to do with Dawn of the Dead?
Yeah, it does. I grew up in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, and that's Night of the Living Dead was filmed about 40 minutes north, and then Dawn of the Dead was filmed in Monroeville Mall. And I remember when they were doing it, it was around Christmas time, and they had to shut the mall down for a couple days, and I was kind of a little kid, and so Monroeville has always had this sort of zombie connection, and Romero, doing his films there, and my parents still live there, so I visit quite often, and so that story has a lot of that in it, and it has a lot of my childhood in it, and it's just kind of fun. It's sort of like a Goosebumps type story. It's not like extremely
Yeah,
gory or graphic or anything.
that's awesome, man. How is that doing? Doing kid stuff? Like, does that sell?
Nah, it doesn't sell anything.
Oh,
Nothing. I have four chapter books that I'm gonna republish. They were done under a different pen name, and I'm gonna republish those in sometime in the next couple weeks. And really, all the children's stuff were those were stories I wrote for my own kids, and I had no
yeah,
intention on ever publishing them. And they kept telling me, they're like, "Dad, you got to put that up. You got to put that up." So it's just more sort of a gift to the universe. I don't think I'll make any money off those things, but my kids really enjoyed them. So I thought if there are other kids out there, they might enjoy them, and I'm going to price them so that they're really cheap and make some deals on them and stuff. But it's not my primary thing. I've had some authors ask me like, "Wow, you're writing these horror stories and you can put up kids books," but I'm not too worried about it because I think parents do most of the purchasing at that age, and they're not
yeah.
going to buy their kid a graphic J.Thorn novel after reading the Monroeville Monster. And if they do, like, it's on them.
It's a free country, right?
Yeah, right. I mean,
I'm not gonna
yeah.
tell them what to do. Uh, on just a random question, what the hell happened to the Browns, man?
I'm sorry?
To the Browns, the Cleveland effing Browns,
You
man.
know,
I had them picked to go to the Super Bowl against the Lions at the beginning of the season, and halfway through they just gave up.
you
Couldn't
know,
believe it.
this is not a very popular thing to say in Cleveland, and so even though I'm in a locked house, I'm a little afraid to bring this up. But I grew up in Pittsburgh, and
Oh.
so I'm not a Browns fan.
Okay, so what
Confessions.
happened to Pittsburgh?
Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you what happened to Pittsburgh. You take the league's second leading rusher out of the game, and that makes a big difference. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. See, I'm a Packers fan, and I had to sit through that damn
I've never seen
abortion.
anything like that. That was unbelievable.
Unreal, dude. Aaron Rodgers couldn't freaking throw a ball to save his life, dude.
Yeah, that
Anyway,
was.
that's a whole separate thing. I ended up coming home, and I'm like, okay, and I just went down and I just wrote 8,000 words. I'm like, they're not going to the Super Bowl now. I could actually write, not worry about anything. Here I am.
Exactly. That's a good approach.
Yeah, it was crazy. There is one other little thing. You wrote a book that you took down that was a tie-in with your band.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. I think this was probably in 2011. Have you ever heard of Omar Khayyam's The Rubaiyat?
No.
It's a poem that was written by like a 10th century Muslim mathematician, but he was really into sort of like the occult and the afterlife, and it's this really cool vibe. You should check it out sometime. It's really interesting. And at the time, we were in Threefold Law. We were trying to come up with some way of differentiating ourselves as a band because, and this is true now, you have to have more than just a recording. Like, you just do. There has to be something else in the band that's a draw. Maybe it's your live show. Maybe you got great merchandise. You got to have something. So we decided, and this was kind of around the time when I was starting to write, and I said, you know what? Why don't we do something like an Iron Maiden type of thing where I'll write a novella that's kind of based on the Rubaiyat, and then we'll write songs that are tied to the story. So we use the elementals, earth, air, wind, and fire, and we wrote songs kind of based on that. And then I wrote a novella that was a tie-in. And so at the time, we sold them as like a special edition. You got the CD and you got the book with it. And it was really sort of really like epic, high fantasy. I guess that's the best way I could describe it. Kind of ancient, kind of had this ancient Lovecraftian feel to it. And so that's what that was. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on if you're reading it or not, it's not my best stuff. And as I said in the Author Marketing Live presentation, I've unpublished almost 250,000 words because I put them up too soon and because they were shit. And it was like me trying to find my voice, and I don't feel like I should ask people to pay for that. And so I pulled a lot of that stuff, and Revenant was part of that.
Now, do you have any plans to do anything with that stuff?
You know, a couple times over the past few years, I've kind of looked at it again. Like Burden of Conquest is another thing that I pulled. That's probably about 150,000 words spread over 2 or 3 books, depending on how I sliced it up at the time. And that's epic fantasy based on the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs in North America in the 15th, 16th century, and I loved it. I loved writing it, but every time I pull it out, I look at it, and I almost feel like I would just be better off rewriting the whole thing. You know, like it's that bad that I kind of feel like I would spend way more time revising it than I would rewriting it. And then I get to the point where I'm like, okay, but am I going to rewrite a historical epic fantasy? It's not really consistent with sort of the way my brand and my platform have developed. So I don't know. I'd like to think someday I'll do something with those. I just don't know what or how.
Yeah. Well, that's some interesting shit, dude. I think I went through all my notes here. So,
wow.
What's coming up? The book you co-wrote with your buddy. That's the next thing, right?
Yeah, that's the next thing. Dan Padavona and I co-wrote it's about a 65,000 word book, and it's at the editor now. We're hoping to have that released in February or March at the latest. It's called The Shadow Witch, and we're billing it as Game of Thrones meets The Blair Witch.
Nice.
Yeah.
So now, how did that go with a writing partner? Like, how did you guys put that together?
Well, I've never co-written before. This was my first co-writing experience, and I did the Black Fang Betrayal, and that's with 10 authors. But basically, I was kind of the manager, and I basically gave them a prompt, and then I stitched it all together. It's not the same as co-writing, but I really enjoyed that, and I thought, wow, I want to do some co-writing, and I watched what Sterling and Stone and those guys are doing, and I'm like, that's really cool. Like I'd like to get into that. And so what happened was Dan reached out to me. This is a funny story. I love telling this, and you'll appreciate this given your music background. I get an email from Dan, just a random email introducing himself, telling me he enjoyed my story, and he's a new horror writer. And he writes, yeah, I'm the son of a musician. You may have heard of him. His name's Ronnie James Dio. He was in Black Sabbath and like. I'm like, yeah, dude, I know who your dad was, So it was a really cool introduction, and Dan is a great guy, and he's really humble, and he's the way things kind of went down. He knew his dad, and he has pictures of him like backstage in the 70s and 80s at Sabbath shows and Dio shows and stuff. But Ronnie James's wife, I guess, kind of blocked out some of the family, and so Dan didn't really get, he's not really connected with any of the estate or anything, but he clearly identifies himself as Ronnie James Dio's son, and Dan is a freaking great writer. Like he's new, but he's really good, and he's really hungry, so he sent me one of his books. He sent me Storeberry, his first novel. It's a vampire novel, not sparkly like old school vampire. And I read it, and I was like, this is really good. Like, this guy's a good storyteller. And so just on a lark, I emailed him and I said, what's your favorite part of writing? Is it the first draft? Is it revisions? Is it the planning? Like, what do you really enjoy? And he wrote back the first draft. And I was like, perfect answer. Because for me, I love the revisions. I love taking something and polishing it and going over and over and over it again until it's really tight. The first draft for me I enjoy, but it's not as enjoyable as revisions. And I told Dan, I'm like, hey man, we're a perfect match. You wanna try co-writing something? And he's like, yeah, sure, why not? And so literally within like 2 weeks we were writing, and Dan wrote the whole first draft, and we did story beats together. We kind of talked about the concept, about what the story was going to look like, the feel, what type of story it was going to be. I formalized some story beats. I gave them to Dan. He wrote the first draft, one act at a time. We did a traditional 3-act story. He would send me an act, and then I would revise it, and then while I'm revising it, he would write the second, send it to me. So we wrote it and revised it and had it ready for the editor in about 5 or 6 weeks. And it was really enjoyable. It was really natural. I've worked with other people in other areas in different ways, and Dan and I just clicked and right on the same page, and the story just was phenomenal, and all I really did was polish it. Like I was a little worried, you know, you go into that and you think like, okay, is the story going to take a right turn, and am I going to be okay with that? But Dan was really good, and I loved what he wrote, and so it's at the editor now, and when it comes back, we'll have a few weeks of revisions, a proofread, and we're going to be ready to go.
Are you guys planning to do more in that series or in that world or anything like that?
Yeah, I think we'd really love to. Dan is right now writing a dystopia, his own dystopian, and I think he's just starting book 2 of that. He hasn't published book 1 yet, but he wrote the manuscript, and now he's working on 2. And we've talked about it, and we said, you know, I have a feeling, like I got it out to I have a tight group of sort of beta readers and friends on Facebook, and I got a copy to them, and their response has been pretty overwhelming that they absolutely loved it. So I told Dan, I said, we need to be prepared if this hits the market and people are hungry for it, like we got to get a second book out fast. And the way it's written, we can go either way. Like we can write prequel, or we can write a new story. Like the ending is satisfying and it's a conclusion, but it gives us a little window of opportunity, and I'm hoping we can take advantage of that.
That is awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming and doing this. This was super fun.
Yeah, man, I had a blast. I really appreciate you asking me to come on and talk about myself. That's sometimes that's hard to do, but like if you're asking good questions, you know, you kind of feel like an egotistical jerk. Like, yeah, it's all about me, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's what guests do. So
that was my last question. How does it feel to be an egotistical jerk?
Oh well, hey, I love it. It's great.
That's so good, man. Well, right on, dude. I will talk to you soon, and I'll let you know when this is up, man.
Great. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, CC. I really appreciate it.
J.Thorn.net.
J.Thorn.net. That's the portal to everything.
All right, man. Awesome. You take it easy.
You too, man.